Hey everybody, I want to introduce you today to a friend of mine who's one of the reasons why I'm not just hopeful but optimistic about the future of the world and our country. This is Michael Ware. Michael, thank you for joining.
Good to be with you, John. Yeah,
really good. Michael is an extraordinary guy, a prolific author, including Reclaiming Hope, which among other things tells the story of your experience. He was, I think, one of the youngest White House officials ever in the Obama White House, working on faith-based initiatives. Is now the head of Public Square Strategies. And deeply devoted follower of Jesus and highly impacted by Dallas Willard. We're walking through right now, Radical Goodness Restored to the Soul, which is a hard thing for the political arena to do, but deeply connected with it. So to start with, Michael, say a bit about your faith journey, and in particular, how you encountered Dallas Willard and how has that impacted the work that you do?
Yeah. Well, great to have this conversation. So I mean, kind of quickly, I grew up in Buffalo, New York, in a sort of big Italian Catholic family, but never sort of...
Hey, hang on one second. My daughter's just walking by us right now. Laura, you want to say hi?
No, I
We're
don't.
taking.
I want to get some more coffee.
Okay, save some for me. Too bad. I felt Laura was a really good friend of Michael's, but she just blew you off and threw you under the bus.
Unbelievable.
Wow.
Well, she has a busy life.
Yeah, she's an important person.
So I didn't take faith all that seriously. Wouldn't have considered myself a Christian until I was 15. A lot happened, but the main thing was someone handed me a tract of Romans, and I read Romans, and it changed my life. And for a while, I thought, well, now I need to go to seminary, become a pastor. Mm-hmm. And thankfully, I had a pastor in my life who said, Michael, look around, there are Christians who aren't pastors. And I thought that was like a keen observation.
Some of whom are watching us right now.
And so I was interested in civics. I went to DC, ended up meeting Barack Obama when I was in DC and worked for him. I was and so fast forward, I'm working in the White House, mm-hmm. and my first meeting is with an organization called International Justice Mission.
Oh, wow.
So
Gary Haugen
mm-hmm. Runs that organization. He's a great friend. Then I was just getting to know him, and he sent to my office Divine Conspiracy.
Oh my goodness.
And it sat on my bookshelf for 6 months because I didn't know who Dallas Willard was. And I thought, what is Gary doing? I'm working, 80 hours a week, and he's sending me
books. Like he has nothing better to do than sit around and read.
My pastor back home in Buffalo wrote a blog post recommending people read Divine Conspiracy. And I thought, okay, if the head of IJM and my pastor back home were telling me to read this book. And I read it, and it was like a second spiritual awakening in my life. I mean, it was just opened up a whole new horizon for me in thinking about what life with Jesus could be like. And since then, I've been drinking deep from the well of Willard, and as so much so that it's hard to tell where my thoughts, begin and his end.
I'm familiar with that scene. Yep. So we're thinking right now about this topic of the fact that there is radical ruin, and a lot of us have difficulty dealing with that, difficulty acknowledging it educationally, culturally, politically. It's not often acknowledged in our day. And there's a paragraph in here I want to read, and then I'd love for you to reflect on it, both in terms of the political arena. I know part of what you're interested in is how do you bring the thoughts and spirit of somebody like Dallas into the public square. So how would these thoughts impact that square, and then how do they affect you working in a place like Washington? So here's the paragraph. This is on page 65, Renovation of the Heart. When Jesus says that those who find their life or soul shall lose it, he is pointing out that those who think they are in control of their life, I am master of my fate, I am captain of my soul, as the poet William Ernest Henley said, will find that they are definitely not in control. They are totally at the mercy of forces beyond them and even within them. They are on a sure course to disintegration and powerlessness, of lostness, both to themselves and to God. They must surrender. What would Washington look like if people who led in that arena lived lives of death to self and surrender? And what are the barriers that get in the way of that?
Yeah. So a few thoughts. So first, this idea of disintegration, I think, is absolutely key. In Allure of Gentleness, Willard offers this like really radical thought in the context of Christian apologetics, and he says that we ought to, when we're sharing the way of Jesus with others, it ought to be done not in the spirit of winning an argument or trying to sort of beat people into submission, but as an act of loving service. And it's radical to hear that in the context of sharing the gospel, because so often we share the gospel
to win
an
argument.
You take that approach of loving service and you say that Christians ought to, their approach in public, in politics, ought to be one of loving service. And it's just like people malfunction, like they just they
no
don't,
box for that.
Christians don't have a box for thinking about, because I think often the conception is politics is the corrupt area of life that we either ignore or we sort of play by the world's rules there to secure some possibility of being Christian in our private lives. But a lot of my work is thinking about how we can be integrated people in all aspects of our lives, including the political. And for me, that means we enter politics not just out of self-interest, not just pursuing control, which is so much of what our politics is right now, which is people going to politics to try and maximize sort of their control and therefore disempower others. And
we're both laughing because there's a dog barking. You may not be able to hear it. And Laura has just crept past the room. Laura, if you could shut that dog up, we would all be grateful.
Pretty funny. It's a good move. I'll try.
For a small Yorkie, that's a lot of noise.
Dogs are always that way.
That's a lot of bark. Can we see politics as a forum to will the good of the other? Not just a place for conflict and antagonism, so that we can be Christian in our personal lives.
And even a barking dog reminds us we are not in control.
That's right.
Indeed. We are not in control. And we're seeing that now with COVID and so many other ways. One last question, Michael. What about for you? You live in a place and you're trying to bring an influence into a sphere where power, image, control, antagonism, the deliberate desire to believe badly about one's political opponents is rampant. How do you seek to follow Jesus and practice death to self and surrender in that arena?
So part of what it looks like is recognizing that some tools in the political toolbox are just off limits for me and other Christians. Like there are way there.
Demonizing opponents.
Demonizing opponents. Telling a story that if you just pass this policy, it'll be completely solved. Overpromising, ultimatizing the penultimate. It's one of the easiest ways to sort of raise support, raise money in the political space is one of two things. You could say, give me your support and I'll pass this legislation in the next 18 months. Or you can say, give me your support and I'll hate the people that you hate.
Oh, gosh.
Wow. And we want to take those things off the table from the start. Now what that means is that that's a sacrifice. There are people who will say, well, that's just not feasible.
Yeah.
But we want to take those things off. Another thing that we've talked about, John, over the years is this idea of, which is Dallas's, of gentle non-cooperation with evil.
Yeah, I love that phrase.
And how can we, I think so often in our politics right now, we see an injustice, and we use that injustice to justify the most destructive responses possible. So what does it look like to see evil, and just I'm not going to take part of it, and I'm not going to let the evil sort of draft me into just another expression
Michael,
of evil.
I hate to do this. We got to stop.
Let's do it.
This has been wonderful. I'd love to talk with you some more sometime.
Yeah, I
if
would
you're
love
open to
that.
it. So today, do not ultimize the penultimate. There's a phrase I bet you've never heard before. And offer gentle non-cooperation with evil. Recognize in your sphere, whatever that is, what are the tools in the toolbox that are off limits to you as a follower of Jesus, where you will surrender and die to self. And then let's pray for our country. Let's pray for Michael. So, I'll see you next time.